And welcome to another episode of Making Sense with Move to Amend. I am Daniel Lee. I'm on the national team. I'm based in Culver City in Southern California, Los Angeles area.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm George Friday, Carolina. I'm on the executive team or whatever Daniel said too, and I'm one of the founders of Move to Amend. So what we're making sense of this week, Daniel? What's happening?
Well, first, I want to take a step to just remind people that, Move to Amend is a national organization and coalition focused on bringing true democracy to the United States. Currently, we're focused on the We the People Amendment, HJR 48, which is an amendment to the Constitution, which explicitly states that corporations are not people and money is not free speech. You can find out more at movetoamend.org. If you're watching this, you probably already know a little, but if you're one of the new folks, go to movetoamend.org and find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So this week, to answer your question, George, this past Monday was the anniversary of First National Bank of Boston versus Bilotti from 1978. It was the very first case that defined free speech rights for corporations, laying some of the groundwork that would lead to the more infamous case Citizens United versus FEC from 2010.
Right.
In this landmark case, the Supreme Court of the United States held that corporations have a First Amendment right to make contributions to ballot initiative campaigns. This case is one of many examples of why overturning Citizens United just isn't enough. And a lot more recent example that illustrates why overturning Citizens United isn't enough is Prop 22 from here in California. It was on the ballot in November. It was a corporate-sponsored ballot initiative that basically stripped employment rights from gig workers in a way that's almost unrevocable. The thing that pissed me off. Well, it passed, and it passed pretty easily. But the thing about it, the thing that's the most annoying and most indicative of corporations flexing that muscle and exercising power is that part of the proposition was that once this passes, it can only be repealed with the 7/8 majority of the state legislature. And I don't know if you're familiar with state legislatures or legislative bodies, but they only get up to like 7/8 for like resolutions to say that Christmas is a good holiday and stuff like that.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, that's never going to happen. But the legal precedent that gave Uber and their counterparts the right to impose the most expensive ballot initiative in U.S. history on California was First Bank of Boston versus Bilotti. If we work to just overturn Citizens United, it will not stop things like this. We must get rid of all corporate constitutional rights and the notion that money is speech. We can't just do one or the other. The We the People Amendment was reintroduced in the House by Pramila Jayapal with 50 initial co-sponsors. We want to be up to 100 by next month. You can go to movetoamend.org, 117 campaign. Once again, movetoamend.org, 117 campaign to learn more about how to get involved and helping us get more co-sponsors for the We the People Amendment in the 117th Congress.
Awesome.
Enough about Congress, I guess.
No, it's important, especially that we've got, it's reintroduced, but it's not really going to go as far unless we get people on the ground in the grassroots pushing it.
True.
Right?
True.
Yeah.
Which is why we focus on community organizing and movement building, because that's the only way we've ever really brought about change.
Right. So now, if you think that the concept of amending the Constitution is radical, here you go. Check this out. Some of y'all won't be surprised by this, but you'll be chilled. The radical right wing is working to rewrite the Constitution, and they're close to making it happen. That's right. So in 2016, right before Donald Trump won, more than 100 state lawmakers came together in Williamsburg, Virginia for a week of, wait for it, Founding Fathers cosplay. But what they really were doing in that 3-day period in Williamsburg, the town that sees itself as a living museum to America's colonial period, during that time, they approved a dramatic overhaul of the United States foundational text. There were lawmakers there, nearly all Republicans. They ratified 6 new constitutional amendments. And those amendments would impose term limits on members of Congress, abolish the federal income tax, and place severe limits on the federal government's ability to levy taxes, implement new regulations on spending money. Now, while the rest of the country was focusing on the presidential elections, these Virginia people were partying, throwing down like it was 1787. But, forget about that for a minute and think about this project to overhaul the Constitution, which is much closer to fruition than many people realize. I know a lot of y'all might know how close they are, but we've really got to get this out and do something about it. Starting as early as 2014, the Conventions of State Project and other conservative groups, including ALEC, helped persuade lawmakers in 15 states to pass resolutions to call for a new constitutional convention. This was led by former Tea Party founder Mark Meckler and other right-wing folks. Mark Meckler is the CEO of Parler, that social media platform that the right wing loves so much. So the Convention of States project has spread like gospel, and has a convention of increasingly radical right audience. And this year, lawmakers proposed 42 Convention of States resolutions in at least 24 new states. So according to the Center for Media and Democracy, who's been paying attention to this convention push and ALEC for a long time, according to them, the passage of those resolutions would trigger the provision in Article 5 that allows for a convention to be called if 34 states demand it. So what would this mean? It means that if Republicans win the midterm elections in 2022, if they take the House and the Senate, they will try to call for an Article 5 convention. And any civil rights, any constitutional protections, few, that the Constitution does protect, they'll be up for grabs at this constitutional convention, which underscores the need right now to work to defeat all of these efforts happening in different states to purge voters so that Republicans win elections. Y'all know that Move to Amend isn't partisan, but when it comes to manipulating the current system, which is flawed deeply, but it can be manipulated to continue to limit what little protections and rights people have. It's very important that we make sure Republicans do not purge our voting rights, especially in the states where, they have been losing. What you saying, Daniel?
I mean, I completely agree. And I know sometimes, you'll talk to a friend and you'll tell them, oh, these people are planning a constitutional convention and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, dude, that's never going to happen, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, don't look at things separately, because there's like this plan for a constitutional convention. There's the voter suppression, like you said, like there's the elimination of, the Voting Rights Act, or whatever, the second or third part, the part that matters. Like there used to be and I think there still are in some places, the emergency financial managers, which basically came into places, like Detroit, places where there are a lot of Black people, and said, hey, you don't know what you're doing. We're going to bring in the emergency financial manager. I don't care who you elected. They got to listen to this guy. It's like Right to Work, which was, Right to Work basically said, hey,
we don't like fire you whenever I feel like it.
Yeah. I mean, and basically unions illegal, or at least less attractive. And unions are the ways that like working class people, and particularly like people of color, have actually gotten a livable wage. Now we're at this point where people are arguing about a $15 minimum wage, and I'm like, come to California, go to New York, go to Seattle. $15 an hour is still a poverty wage. It's nothing. And we got to fight for that. But these little small things, like the emergency financial manager taking the power away from the people that you elected, the right to work, taking the power away from working people and voter suppression and this constitutional, they're all just like little slivers of fascism. But if you put them together, we got a system where basically, if you're not rich or popular or amusing to rich people, if you're not, someone who comes from a family that's been rich for a long time, you don't matter. Like you can see these things as separate and disconnected, but they know what they're doing. It's all the same people, like talked about Alec being a part of it, and people got enraged about Alec, and then they forgot that they existed. And it's like, no, they're still here.
Keep going. They've been churning.
Yeah, they have
their work for years.
The name, like they're still working, and the bills that come down from states, that like in Georgia, like you can't give like a Coke or a water.
Right, water.
Somebody standing in line to vote. What the fuck is that? Like
crazy.
Like that's basically saying we don't want you to vote. Like, like it's being more explicit about it. And I mean, it's the reason where we are. Like we can't see all of these efforts as being, connected and being pushed forward by the same people with the same interest, giving people who still have power even more power, even as their percentage of the population decreases. People have become, by and large, more empathetic, but their vote matters less because we have corporate control, which is why the We the People Amendment is so important. If corporations have all of this speech, I mean, what are we going to do? And it's one of the frustrations I have personally as a local elected official here in California. Anytime you try to substantively address the climate crisis, you're being completely held back. Like our governor this week made a really big announcement about like banning fracking and phasing out oil drilling, but what he didn't like foreground in, and it's like he's banning fracking in like 2024, and he is wanting to phase out oil drilling by 2045. And I'm like, dude, we all read the report that came out like in 2019. It said we have 12 years to really substantively address climate change, or we're going to get all that worst case scenario stuff thrown at us. And it's like 2045, that's about 15 years too late. I don't know. Like there are things that we've talked about before, like Nestle. I'm sure you're familiar with George, who, they pump a whole lot of water out of California on a regular basis with a permit that they got in 1865 that we have not sought to like update or modify. Right. There
was a cease and desist order on Nestle. Was that this week? California water officials sent a cease and desist order, which it didn't make it accuses Nestle of draining more water out of Southern California than permitted. That's not the same as shutting them down.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think it's a good step because, on a yearly basis, they seem to be taking out like 58 million gallons when they're, by their permit, they can get 2.3 million gallons. But I'm like, all they pay for is the permit. They pay $2,000 a year. They don't pay for the water.
$2,000 a year for something they make millions off in profit.
It's crazy, and it's California's water. Like we've been in drought conditions.
Y'all need water
off for a very long time, and with climate change, like we're going to be in drought conditions fairly regularly for a long, long time. The thought that we're the thought that we're allowing like an incredibly rich company to pay $2,000 a year to make millions and millions and millions of dollars a year when we're going to start rationing water again, when, our crops won't be irrigated. It's just mind blowing to me. It's mind blowing that we let things like that happen, but we let them happen because of the corporate power. Like, all these corporations basically have people owned in our Senate and our Assembly. There was actually a bill that I was curious about in California that was supposedly going to be introduced in committee this week. It was called AB 20, and it was a bill to basically publicly fund elections in California. Democrats have the governorship, the state Senate, and the Assembly, super majorities.
Right.
The bill was introduced in committee. It couldn't even get a second from any Democrat. It didn't even get out of committee. It's not even going to be like introduced on the floor or voted down. It's just like, we got super majorities of Democrats who say this and say that, but we're not even going to listen to that. And somebody said, I forget who it was, one of our state assembly members or state senators said, well, we don't need a bill like this because, all of our assembly members are so good-hearted. And I was like,
oh my God. That's like saying you don't need a union because we treat our employees so well.
exactly.
Shut up.
Did you see all the fake Amazon tweets before the union vote in Alabama and Amazon?
I didn't.
Oh God, we should
that same lie. We don't need a union because we treat you so well. We good to our people. We good to our slaves. We treat them right.
There were basically fake employee social media accounts like Amazon Worker 326, love it, who's just like, I love working at Amazon because we get treated so well and our benefits are blah blah blah. And it was just like each comment on the tweet or each reply was just like, how long have you been a robot? Do you know you're a robot? Is that because it was so obviously fake. It was just like, oh, you opened your account 3 days ago, and
oh no,
the union vote is
to say how great Amazon is.
Yeah, it was just like, okay, Amazon, there are a lot of people that you pay really well, but most of the people who rely on your service are being serviced by people that you don't pay well.
And you treat really horribly.
By people that you make pee in a can. Like,
yes.
Like that is, but yeah, Amazon got taken to the fence for that. But it's companies like Amazon and Nestle and ExxonMobil and others that are holding up things like the Green New Deal, which is really
is it in the Senate or House bill?
I think it's been reintroduced, or Merkley and AOC were talking about it last week. Like, they're bringing it back, but I don't know. I feel like Democrats are going to Democrat. I don't really know what's going to happen. And I think, a big, huge reason is corporate power. And, the fact that, people who are on the center or on the left think that their candidates and their representatives are somehow immune. And that's just not true.
Some reps will pay attention. So those of y'all who know reps, get in touch with those reps that don't suck and get them to back both the Green New Deal and the We the People Amendment. And pressure what reps you do have to do the right thing. Pressure them in every way that you can, in every way you think is possible. Because that needs to happen.
I'm curious about your opinions on the Biden's first 100 days, George. I've heard a lot from a lot of folks that I don't necessarily agree with, but curious what you think.
Well, Uncle Joe's a Democrat or a Demopublican, and among the priority issues I care about is peace and justice. We made an agreement, we, the U.S., and I take responsibility for what we do outside of the borders as a U.S. citizen. We agreed to be out of Afghanistan by May 1st. That's not going to happen. And even when we're supposed to be out, now they said by September 11th, we will still be dominating that area causing conflict that, spills over to Syria and Yemen, with all of the ecological atrocities that we've created there, all of the economic and human rights crises, that only that tiny piece of the pie, Daniel, is enough for me to give Biden a D- in his first 100 days. Not to mention the fact that there are still children in cages at the border. And, he sent out, especially for my family, has benefited from getting stimulus checks. I know that. That's true. But that doesn't mitigate anything that's not working. You described California, where you were, people having a supermajority and not making smart decisions. I feel the same way about the federal government now. Not that we have a supermajority, but we should be able to get some meaningful change out of this House and Senate. I haven't seen it.
Well, and for me, like, I mean, I wasn't going to talk about this, but you mentioned the stimulus checks, and I'm just like, what is it, like 2.5 checks in like a year of a pandemic when a lot of people have been unemployed for 13 months? Like,
right.
That's crazy. You don't know.
That is crazy. But Biden's, we can only hold him for his 100 days. Hasn't he done 2 in 100 days?
I think the second one was actually sort of Trump, towards the end of the Trump thing, and then he did the third. Yeah. But I don't know.
So he gets credit for 1 out of 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's not impressive.
Well, and then like for me, he also been like had some big talk after he was pressured about like student debt and like, what we can possibly do about that. And at this point, it's like, it's so many generations. Like people talk about millennials, but it's like Gen Xers still have debt. There are some baby boomers who still have debt. Like
I'd have debt, except they've probably written it off because it's been 40 years.
But very, very notably, I like to remind people that like President Obama and Michelle Obama paid off their student debt after he became president. Like,
oh, sweet. That's like, a good one, right?
Like, it's like, I mean, they were doing well. They were paying what they needed to, and buying.
They were raising their family. They were,
like,
solid citizens, all that crap. But
this is a
debt is no joke.
It's a multi-generational problem, and for the most part, it's like student loans were supposedly created to be low interest loans, so that people could afford to go to school without having to work, a full-time job, even though like me and a lot of other people I know work full-time jobs anyway. Yep. But it would be the ultimate stimulus that would be multi-generational. Like right. There are Xennials or Generation Y. I mean, there's Generation Y, there's, the millennials, there's Generation X, and they're baby boomers who would all benefit because they still got people sending them stuff, or they still got a knock on their credit report, or they still got this or that. And it's like, hey, if I don't have to pay this $500 a month bill for my student loans, maybe I could afford to.
It does affect generational wealth.
Oh yeah.
I mean, having generational debt. Some foolish video someone sent me talked about wealth in Boston. In Boston, the average white family's wealth is nearly $250,000 of wealth in a family. Black families, $8.
Yeah,
that's just crazy, right?
I don't want to go into a thing about.
Let's not talk about wealth. It'll bum me out. We're better off talking about Biden's 100 days.
No. I like that you brought up that point, but like I have a running thing with my brother and my niece and my nephew who are like really big fans of Boston, and I'm like, every time I go, I feel like someone's just waiting to push me in front of a car. Like I don't necessarily feel welcome in Boston. I'm just gonna say that. And historically, I'm just like, oh, that's a lot of white people who probably don't like me. or who will pretend to until they get drunk. But you know, I got to reflect on the fact that my brother's a doctor, and my niece and my nephew grew up as, you know, son and daughter of two doctors, so they have a different perspective and probably had a different experience in Boston than I did, you know, as someone who's working class and just like, I'm here to help organize and do activist stuff.
Right.
Oh, why are these people looking at me like that? But yeah, Biden's first 100 days, the other thing he seems to already be backtracking on is, you know, taxing the rich in some way. Like, I mean, he's talked about
Oh no, didn't he talk about that like last night? Right?
Well, that wasn't a State of the Union, but like presidential addresses are presidential addresses. Like I put no faith in, you know, outcomes of that. Like, you know, President Obama talked a hell of a lot about Citizens United, but never really seemed to push for it. Like, we need to amend the Constitution. And I was like, okay, when's that going to be part of your like push? Like, I don't see that being a part of your like post-election thing either, except for, you know, the weak bill that doesn't really do what it should. But like, he did talk about it in his first 100 days. You're right. You're right.
Oh, okay. So he didn't bring it up last night. Something about
Oh no, he did bring it up. He did bring it up. That's what I'm saying. You're right.
But bringing it up doesn't mean you're taking any action. You're just talking about shit. That's right.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
And he's definitely not into a wealth tax, which I think, you know,
I'm all about the wealth tax.
That's a way to pay for a lot of different things, a lot of social service programs, monthly stimulus, reparations.
And, you know, talk about somebody it's not going to make a difference for. You know, if you're a billionaire and a few $1 million goes away, it just makes no difference whatsoever.
Yeah, and the only reason that the only reason a lot of these, you know, really extremely moneyed folks like push back on that stuff is power. It's like, well, it would be indicative that we have less power than we think we should have. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have to get rid of any of my houses or my cars or my, you know, wives or husbands, but I would seem less powerful, and I just don't feel right about that.
You know, my brain just doesn't go there. All I can think of, Daniel, is a Simpsons episode where the old guy, Mr. Burns, got kicked out of the Billionaires Club because he dropped down to being just a multimillionaire, not a billionaire, for like a week. It was crazy. So that's what I picture. That's the closest I can get.
That's a good episode. I thought you were going to go to one of my favorite episodes from the first season. It's called Bart Gets Hit by a Car.
Oh, yeah.
And Mr. Burns, like, you know, rides down the street. You see it coming. He hits Bart. But during the court trial, Mr. Burns like interrupts and he's like, I'm rich. I should be able to hit as many kids as I want.
I know.
It's like,
yep.
That's it. Like, The Simpsons used to be so brilliant. People forget. Like, it was like the tip of the top when it came to satire, and like it would have lines that just sum up America completely. It's like, yeah, that's how it is. By the way, Caitlyn Jenner is running for governor in California. And
in California? I thought she lived in New York. I'm so behind.
The only reason I mention it is she killed someone with her car a few years ago on Pacific Coast Highway.
So she does live in New York. Well, that will be an interesting campaign.
Yes. Yeah.
Putting Chappaquiddick to shame. You're probably very young and barely know Chappaquiddick. But it's the same. And that's Boston, though. Or Massachusetts, not Boston. So now California has its own in Caitlyn Jenner if she runs for office. So there was something about this week I wanted to talk about that I read about earlier today, and it has to do with a meeting that Kamala Harris had. No, not a face-to-face meeting. She spoke with the president of Guatemala, telling him basically, you guys are corrupt. You need to get your act together. And in that conversation, she didn't mention the role that the U.S. has played in where Guatemala is now. So basically, y'all are a mess. Oh, yeah, we did help you get there. You know, you can say the same thing about Afghanistan, Palestine. That's us. But in 1954, the U.S. funded a coup called Operation PB Success. This sucks. That deposed the democratically elected Guatemalan president Jacobo Arbenz and ended the Guatemalan Revolution that had lasted 10 years. The U.S. then backed the far-right military regime, like we always do, and roughly 200,000 Guatemalans died as a result of the coup. So it's a really gross understatement to say that Guatemala is a mess because where it's at as a result of their poor government and not our messing as we do all over the world.
Yeah.
And also in Latin America, there's did you know that Latin America has more private security personnel than police officers? So they don't really have the kind of municipal police officers. They're private personnel paid by that's right. And their sole objective is to protect the private interests of the businesses that are functioning in Latin America. Mostly mining companies. They hire private security companies that repress any activists that are trying to expose shady operations going on. Now let's imagine, talking about something that might come north. So these private security people that are protecting the corporations and repress any kind of activism or protest, they are usually conveyed by the term neoliberal insurgency, privatized military industries whose line of business is repressing dissent. Now, when we look at what's going on in the US with corporations and all of those blocks they put into place to repress us, to take over, including, setting things up to have an Article 5 convention. And you said just slivers in fascism. So, hiring mercenaries to protect your interest. There you go. That's where we are. And I don't know what that means for us if we don't pass the We the People amendment, so that corporations have no power, no voice, only what we grant them, the duties and privileges we the people grant them. Corporations have no voice, no power. Got to make that clear.
Yeah, and while you were talking, like my Google Home heard Article 5 and was just telling me how like an Article 5 convention would happen, and I was like, dude, I did not ask you to say anything.
I'm so sorry.
But thank you. But yeah, no, I mean, like, you could cut and paste Guatemala with like so many other countries in South America, Central America, Asia, Africa. It's just like, it's one of the things I've been trying to challenge as a city council member, because like people feel like the fundamental role of government is to make sure businesses can do what they can the best way. And it's like, no, that's not why I'm involved.
Right.
It's to provide for your people, to make sure, the most people are taken care of in the best way. And, focusing only on business necessarily means income inequality, poverty. Somebody's got to lose, and we sort of set the standard in the Iraq War in particular, with companies like Custer Battles and El Salvador, Argentina. Yes, Linda, definitely. Like, we've been exporting or starting wars or excursions or whatever to protect, Chevron, to protect, United Fruit Company, to protect, whoever, for most of this, country's founding. And like that the lack of knowledge of our history as a country, not just being like imperialist, not just being colonial, but breaking down colonial to what it means. The first colonialism was done on the part of corporations. It was like the East India Company,
right?
going into India. It was a corporate, like uh it was for profit, basically.
Yeah.
And we need to be honest about that. And it was something that was done under Whigs and Tories, Democrats, Republicans, whoever happened to be in power at the moment. The fact that we have a Democrat in office now doesn't really change the enemy. The enemy is corporate power. And apparently there was some comment about MTA being partisan. I think there's a difference between being perceived as partisan and being perceived as honest. Some people feel like the truth has a leftist stance, but it does not. It is just something
The
that
truth.
people haven't
Facts
heard
are
before.
facts. Yes, facts are facts. And the fact that the Constitution was a property rights document, not a human rights document, is a fact. The fact that all of the rulings post the Bill of Rights support businesses and corporations over humans.
Yeah, and thank you for
Ruling after ruling after ruling. Facts.
And thank you for your comment, Paul. He says he's a lifelong Democrat, but the criticism about the California Dems is called for. Both Dems and Repubs both eat from the corporate big money trough. They do.
Oh, yeah,
they do. And some just straight up lie about it. It's like, I don't take corporate contributions. I just take contributions from 100 employees that work at the same corporation who all happen to contribute the same amount that they happen to be given as a bonus by their CEO. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing.
No. It is an ugly system. There's one more story I wanted to share. Sure, I have to find it. Let me think. Oh, it's about our lovely Supreme Court. Maybe it'll turn out to be a good thing, but I kind of feel like it might not be. So Wednesday, 2 days ago, the Supreme Court appeared ready to rule in favor of a former Pennsylvania high school cheerleader who was disciplined over a foul-mouthed social media post, but cautiously approached the broader question of whether public schools can punish students for what they say off campus. The 9 justices heard nearly 2 hours of arguments in an appeal by the Mayano Area District Court in the lower court ruling in favor of Brandy Levy that found the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment guarantee of free speech bars public school officials from regulating off-campus speech. The case could impact the free speech rights of America's 50 million public school students. In its ruling, now expected at the end of June, would clarify the limits of an important 1969 Supreme Court precedent that let public schools punish student speech when it could substantially disrupt a school community. If the school district would have their way, a social media photo showing a student wearing an anti-Trump jacket would become a punishable offense if it caused even one classmate to complain. So that's what's on the line. Damn. All right, think about what is this? What does this mean to you when you hear this?
I mean, this is free speech is always, it always makes me think about the paradox of tolerance, and it's very hard to draw a line because if you're tolerant to everything, it means you're tolerant to hate speech. Eventually, you eventually say, hey, those people who say they want to murder me and my family, and they will the next time they get a chance, so don't slip up, they're just exercising free speech. And it's just like, you get so far down the road that it's like, oh, okay. But on the flip side, they're kids who are just targeted, and they have their social media monitored. Because the administration doesn't like them, because they don't do this or that, because they aren't compliant, and you don't want those kids to suffer negative effects for speaking their mind. Though, to complicate the first two things I said, a lot of us, see the Make America Great Again hat as a symbol of hate.
It's a
And,
threat.
other people don't. Or they pretend not to. So free speech is always a sticky thing for me. When people are too straight up everything all the time, I'm like, eventually someone that you're tolerating is gonna kill you. That's just the truth. You're like, I'm just gonna tolerate these people's right to bear arms. I'm just gonna tolerate these people's rights to say I'm gonna once it gets into threats and stuff like that, there are some legal limits that are triggered, but it's a very slippery thing because you want kids to be protected. You want kids.
You do, but you also don't want the bar so low that one person complaining about a jacket offending them. I mean, that's too low a bar. No, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, but you also can't stop everyone in that theater from watching a film because you saw a nipple.
Yeah.
So, what I'm saying?
Or you can't anymore. The Catholic League used to do that all the time.
Oh, okay.
Back in the 30s and 40s. The Catholic Church was literally in charge of deciding which movies could be released and which could not. That's crazy.
That is crazy. I had no idea that was happening.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments we need to get to? Because we've only got about 20 more minutes.
Is there anything in particular you thought was interesting this month? I know, I'll just share. There's one thing that we finally did in our city that I'm happy that we did.
Oh, good! I like good news. What's that?
We finally passed hero pay for our grocery and pharmacy workers, so they get an extra $5 an hour for about 2 months. Oh no, 4 months. A lot of people did it in December or January. It took us a while to get it in front of us. I wanted to do it both for grocery store workers and for healthcare workers, but we're going to consider healthcare workers later. We also had a very long conversation about reimagining public safety, which did not go the way that I wanted it to go. But
bummer.
We're moving forward. We're moving forward with some stuff that's good, but it's
are there any social workers or community activists involved in that discussion about redefining community safety?
Well, I mean, I'm the principal one, but a lot there are a lot of social workers. There are a lot in our community who are very passionate and pushing us forward. Actually, a lot of professors at UCLA and USC who live in our city are been very strong advocates. They bring the evidence and the facts around disproportionate arrests of young people of color for very small things, the very small amount of violent crime we have in our city, and that type of thing, and the fact that deploying a social worker or a social worker and a nurse or a social worker and whoever is less expensive if someone's going through a mental health crisis, and it usually results, well, in the cities that have had it like Eugene, Oregon, it never results in anyone being shot or the people being deployed being injured by the people they're trying to help.
Yep.
There's this huge argument that people have around safety when it comes to deploying someone besides police officers to handle certain things. And I'm like, I don't know if people know the wide variety of things that social workers do, but they go into these situations that you think are incredibly dangerous every day.
Every day.
There's some people where it's 5 days a week.
Yep.
I go to some situation where if this was routed through 911, police would be
people would be dead. There would be blood on the ground.
And it's like we have the facts to support the fact that this can be done another way. It's just like a culture of violence. And, Reverend Lawson, who, in my full-time work, we talk about it all the time. It's like our solution to everything.
Yes.
And that has a lot to do.
We can do a whole lot better. One of the most brilliant things I learned many years ago when I was in LA with a group there, the Youth Justice Coalition in I can see their building, but I'm not sure what part of town they're in. But they asked for 1% of the budget that goes to law enforcement for youth programs. At that time, I think it was 2014, 1% would have been over $1 million.
Yeah.
Come on, 1%?
Well,
1%, people. Yeah.
we did have a win that was not quite along the same lines because YJC has been pushing the 1%. Like I've participated in some of their marches across the city. Like they did like a 30-mile march or something
Yeah.
like each year for many years. In November, Measure J passed, and it takes I think the bill was intended to take up to 10% of the LA County budget and redistributed for like restorative justice and other really care focused. Um, it was more focused on outcomes than I would like after you've interacted with law enforcement. I'm all
Right.
about prevention, but
Yes.
still, it was different than what LAPD and
Had
LA
been
County
doing.
were doing before it passed. But like everything, like I always say, democracy happens after elections. The amount that it's supposed to be is not the amount that it's sort of showing up as, like
Uh,
operationally from the county.
mhm.
It's like, oh, that's like a slight increase from last year. This should be like a tenfold increase. This should be like at least $100 million, and it looks like five. So like there's some work to do to make sure that all the money that's supposed to be going to community groups, to restorative justice, to trauma treatment programs actually goes to that. But the voters at least said that's what we want in November. Is that going to actually happen? Hopefully.
Yeah, voters have to stay on top of stuff after the elections, or they'll get sold out. Oh, mercy. Democracy is a job for us too. Those of us who are we the people, we got work to do to make it happen.
Yeah.
Um,
The one
so
big
I want to let folks know what's happening with Move to Amend coming up. Next week, here during Making Sense, you'll have the wonderful Caitlyn Saposi Belknap and Jessica Munger chopping it up like Daniel and I have been doing today. And we really appreciate all of the support that you give us, both support by working on your reps and getting them to support the We the People amendment with the 117th Congress, and going to the movetoamend.org 117 campaign, just so you have a way to lobby your reps and make sure they're sponsoring. If they're already sponsoring, give them hugs and kisses and thanks, and tell them that they're awesome. And keep checking the 117th campaign website just to see if and when your rep gets on board, and let them know that. Call every week. Every week. You can call multiple times a week. Won't hurt. Just keep it up. Got to keep it up. And please, if you're not already a financial supporter of Move to Amend, a financial sustainer of Move to Amend, become one today. Go to Move to Amend, I think, movetoamend.org/donate, and sign up to give $5, $10, or $15 a month or a quarter. It's the best way to support us. Very needed and very easy to do. Then you can be part of something Wednesdays. It's We the People Wednesdays, where you can call your reps or do a one-click, just one click. You're connected immediately to the rep's office. You can get to tell them what you need. That when I said once a week, here you go. You can go once a day, once a week. We the People Wednesdays. And then we've got the petition, if you haven't already signed it, or getting people who want and need to sign it. That's at movetoamend.org/petition or /motion, not petition. And we've got a new and improved, wonderful movement education program that's open not just for affiliates, but for use by other groups that can benefit from it. That's at movetoamend.org/education3. Trying to think if there's anything else we need to tell folks. Daniel, what do you think?
I think we're good. Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I would actually just say is, like, I know people are getting vaccinated and stuff, but you still got to be safe. Like, I went out to grab some food yesterday, and there were so many people without masks. I was just like, I know you haven't been vaccinated yet.
And even when vaccinated, you still have to wear your mask when you're
Yeah.
outdoors, when you're close to people, when you're indoors. When indoors, you still have to wear your mask. If you're indoors with company, not by yourself, but let's say you get 5 people over who've all been vaccinated, and you're going to have dinner. I think you still have to wear your mask.
Yeah, I mean, I've been vaccinated since September, and I'm still wearing my mask. So, like,
that's what's up.
Doing it. But yeah, we need everybody alive if we're going to do and, enact the type of systemic change we need to survive as a species and a people here in the United States.
We absolutely do. And many thanks to Radical Guide for hosting the all new and improved movement education program. I didn't say that. And thanks, Radical Guide. Yay. And yay to everybody who's joined us today.
And
thanks
to Alfonso for always holding it down on the back end.
Yes, many thanks. We have a great team at Move to Amend. Yet another reason to chip in $5, $10, $15 a month to make it happen. Or better yet, if you haven't used your stimulus check, give some of it to Move to Amend. And if you're going to get another one, if it hasn't come yet, give some of it to Move to Amend. You're getting by. You're all right. Help us get by. Throw us some change. Yes. All right. Change for change.
Yeah, with that, I think we're good. Join us next week for another episode of Making Sense. I'm sure a lot of interesting things will happen. May Day is tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
We need a minimum $15 an hour minimum wage for all workers anywhere, no matter what they do. But then we need to fight to make sure that increases year to year with the cost of living. And then we need to work for a living wage because $15 just ain't enough.
True. Yeah. People need to thrive, not just survive.
Yeah.
It's not about just getting by. It's about being all right, being whole, as healthy as we can be. All right, y'all. Come on next week. We'll see you then. Bye.